The year is 2024. The building smells of old books and new ideas. Polished concrete floors, glass walls. Iowa State University, the Agricultural Sciences Wing. A young man, maybe 19, points at a display. It's a long glass case, lit from within. Inside, a half-dozen small machines are arranged on pedestals. They look like metallic insects, sleek, white, with carbon fiber rotors. An older man stands beside him, his shoulders stooped by time. His name is Frank. He's 78 years old. He ran the largest John Deere dealership in 3 counties for nearly 50 years. He knows machinery. His grandson reads the plaque on the wall. The Harris Method, pioneered by Sarah Harris, 2004. A system of autonomous microdrones for precision seeding, nutrient delivery, and pest management. Revolutionized small acreage farming by reducing input costs by over 60%. Frank squints at the name, Harris. Sarah Harris. The name unlocks a door in his memory he had tried to keep shut. He steps closer to the glass. He sees the small, elegant machines. He doesn't see innovation. He sees the ghost of something else, something huge and green and powerful. He sees a John Deere S780 combine, brand new. The paint so fresh it still smelled like the factory. He sees a young woman's face, pale with grief and fear, eyes filled with a resolve that he, in his wisdom, had called foolishness. His grandson says, "Isn't that cool, Grandpa? She changed everything." Frank doesn't answer. He feels a cold weight in his chest, the weight of a memory, the weight of being certain. He had been so certain he was right. He had told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life. He had told her she was destroying her father's legacy. He looks at the plaque again. Pioneered by Sarah Harris. The room is quiet, but in his head, a conversation from 20 years ago is shouting. This channel tells the stories of quiet revolutions, the moments that change the world, not with a bang, but with a signature on a piece of paper, with a decision made at a kitchen table. These are the stories you won't find anywhere else. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because what happened in 2004 wasn't just about a machine. It was about the moment a legacy was almost protected to death. Let's go back. The year is 2004. The month is May. The air in Iowa is thick with the smell of turned earth and diesel. Arthur Harris is 62 years old, and for the first time in his life, he feels like he has finally made it. Parked in his machine shed, filling the entire space like a slumbering giant, is a John Deere S780 combine. It cost him $715,243, a sum so large it felt like a foreign language in his mouth. He didn't have the money, not really. He had the land. 880 acres of the best black dirt in the county. And he had a signature. The bank owned the machine, but his name was on the side. Harris Farms. For 40 years, he had farmed with used equipment, machines welded and patched and prayed over. He had made a living. He had raised a daughter. He had buried a wife. He had held on. This machine, this S780, was not just a tool. It was a monument. A testament to a life of fighting the dirt, the weather, the markets. It was his declaration of permanence. He stood in the shed every morning with a cup of coffee, just looking at it, touching the enormous tires, running a hand along the cool green paneling. His daughter, Sarah, would watch him from the farmhouse window. She was 28. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She had a degree in agronomy from that same university, but she worked at the local grain co-op doing soil analysis. Her father's farm was his kingdom. She was a welcome visitor, but he was the king. He made the decisions. He signed the papers. He shouldered the debt. He told her, This is for you, Sarah. When I'm gone, this farm will be ready. This machine will make sure of it. It will do the work of 3 men. It will secure your future." She would smile and nod, but at night she looked at the commodity prices. She looked at the rising cost of fuel. She looked at the amortization schedule for the loan he had signed, and she felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. The numbers didn't work. The margins were too thin. The beautiful green machine in the shed looked less like a monument and more like a tombstone. On May 14th, a Tuesday, Arthur was out in the west field, checking the young corn. The sun was high, the air was still. He put his hand on the front tire of his new combine, parked at the edge of the field. A wave of pressure spread across his chest, not a sharp pain, a crushing weight, like the machine itself was pressing down on him. His breath caught. His legs gave out. He slid down the tire, leaving a dusty streak on the black rubber. His last thought before the world went dark. I haven't even made the first payment. The heart attack was massive. The doctors called it a widowmaker. They said it was a miracle he survived the ride to the hospital. He was in a coma for 3 days. Sarah sat by his bed, listening to the rhythmic beep of the machines that were keeping him alive. She held his rough, calloused hand, a hand that knew the language of soil and steel. The doctor was kind, he was gentle, but his words were heavy. If he wakes up, the doctor said, his life will be different. No more 16-hour days, no more stress. The kind of work he does, it's not possible anymore. Sarah nodded. She looked at her father's still face. The farm was his life. Taking the work from him would be like taking the air from his lungs. And then another thought came. Cold, practical. The first payment on the combine was due in 60 days, $112,000. Harvest was 4 months away, and the man who ran the harvest was lying in this bed, wired to a symphony of beeps and drips. She went home that night, sat at the kitchen table her mother had polished for 30 years. She pulled out the farm's ledgers, her father's careful, blocky handwriting. She saw the numbers he had never shown her, the operating loans, the mortgage on the land he'd inherited free and clear, the second mortgage he'd taken out for the combine's down payment. The farm wasn't thriving, it was drowning, quietly, respectably, and the S780 was the anchor. She made a decision that night, at 2 a.m, under the bare bulb of the kitchen light. A decision that felt like a betrayal. A decision that felt like the only possible way to save him. The next morning, she walked into the John Deere dealership. The place smelled of fresh paint, rubber, and coffee. Frank was in his office. He was a pillar of the community, coached Little League, sat on the church board. He had known Sarah since she was a little girl. He stood up when she walked in. His face was a mask of gentle concern. "Sarah," he said, "I was so sorry to hear about Arthur. How is he?" She told him the truth, the uncertainty. Then she said the words she had rehearsed all morning. "Frank, I need to sell the combine back." Frank's smile faded. He sat down. He motioned for her to take a seat. She remained standing. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft, paternal, "you're under a tremendous amount of stress. People don't think clearly in these situations." "I need to sell it, Frank. We can't make the payments. He won't be able to run the harvest." Frank leaned forward. "Let's not make any sudden moves," he said. "We can talk to the bank. We can defer the payments. I can help you find a custom harvester to bring the crop in. We can work this out. Your father,
This machine is his dream. It's the culmination of his whole life. To sell it, it would break his heart. He sounded so reasonable, so kind.
He was trying to protect her. He was trying to protect Arthur's legacy. She felt her resolve waver. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was just grief and fear talking. Then she remembered the numbers in the ledger, the red ink, the crushing weight of it all. The combine wasn't his dream. It was the beautiful, expensive weapon that was killing him. Slowly, silently. My mind is made up, Frank. I want you to buy it back. Now Frank's tone changed. Still kind, but firm. The kindness of a man who is absolutely certain he knows best. Sarah, I can't do that. I'm not going to be the man who sells a farmer his dream machine in April and then takes it away from his daughter in May while he's lying in a hospital bed. The community would never forgive me. Arthur would never forgive me. And frankly, you would never forgive yourself. He stood up, a signal the conversation was over. Go home, he said. Get some rest. We'll talk in a week, when you're thinking more clearly. He walked her to the door, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. He was protecting a family from its own grief, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. Not cruelty, not greed, just the quiet, gentle, absolute certainty of a good man who is wrong. Sarah walked out into the bright sunlight. She felt dizzy. Every person she respected, every authority figure in her life would agree with Frank. She was just a girl, emotional, not thinking straight. She got in her truck and drove. Not home. She drove to the county line, to a small, dusty workshop with a sign that read, Miller's Custom Ag. A man named Dave Miller, barely 30, was welding a planter hitch. He was known as a bit of a radical, always tinkering, always experimenting. He bought used equipment and modified it. He was not part of the big ag club. She told him she had a 2004 John Deere S780 with 12 hours on the engine, for sale. Cash, no questions asked, at a 20% discount from the sticker price. Dave Miller put down his welding torch. He looked at her for a long time. He knew Arthur. He knew what that machine meant. He said, "Does your father know you're doing this?" Sarah met his gaze. "My father is fighting for his life. I'm fighting for his farm." Dave nodded slowly. He saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't grief. It was war. He said, "Let me make a few calls." She went home. She sat at the kitchen table, waiting. She thought about her father. She remembered something he told her when she was a little girl. She had been crying over a broken toy. He had knelt down in the dirt beside her. He picked up a handful of soil. He let it run through his fingers. He said, "Don't ever cry over anything that can be replaced." "This," he said, pointing to the ground, "this is the only thing that matters. They took everything from your granddad in the 30s. The bank took the house, the tractor, the cows, everything except the dirt. The dirt is enough. Everything else is just a tool." The phone rang. It was Dave Miller. He had a buyer, a corporate farm consortium from 3 states away. They wanted the machine. They had the cash. They would have a truck there on Friday. Sarah hung up the phone. She felt no relief, no joy, just the cold, heavy certainty that she had just betrayed her father in order to save him. On Friday, the truck came, a long, lowboy trailer. A man with a clipboard directed the driver. Sarah stood on the porch and watched. She watched them winch the S780 out of the shed. It looked magnificent in the morning sun, a green jewel, a monument to a dream she was dismantling. Her neighbors watched too, from their trucks on the road, from their own farmyards. They didn't wave, they just stared. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their disapproval. The whole county was talking. Arthur Harris's daughter, selling the new combine while he's in the hospital. Poor girl must be losing her mind. Frank drove by himself. He slowed his truck, but he didn't stop. He just shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. She was alone, utterly. Have you ever had to make a choice like that? A decision that isolated you from your own community? A choice that made you an outsider in your own home? Tell us about it in the comments below. Because what Sarah did next, she did completely alone, with no one's approval and no one's permission. The wire transfer came through that afternoon, $572,194. The first thing Sarah did was go to the bank. She walked up to the loan officer who had been so friendly to her father. She paid off the combine loan in full, a check for $112,000. The loan officer was stunned. He tried to make small talk. Sarah just signed the papers. Then she paid off the second mortgage, another $75,000, cash. She walked out of the bank with the farm's original deed in her hand. The land was theirs again, free and clear, for the first time in 30 years. She had $385,000 left, a fortune, enough to hire custom harvesters for a decade, enough to buy good, used equipment, enough to keep the farm running just as it always had. That was the sensible path. That's what Frank would have advised. That's what the whole county expected. But Sarah wasn't thinking about sensible. She was thinking about the ledger book. She was thinking about the crushing weight that had put her father in that hospital bed. The farm couldn't survive by doing things the old way, not even with new equipment. The model was broken. The endless cycle of debt for bigger machines to farm more land to cover the debt. It was a game you couldn't win. You could only lose more slowly. She took the remaining money and she invested it. All of it. In a two-person startup out of California she'd read about in an obscure academic journal. A company called Ag Robotics. They had a radical idea. Instead of one massive heavy machine to do everything, why not 100 small, light, intelligent machines? They had built prototypes, small drones, guided by GPS, that could precision seed, one seed at a time, that could analyze the soil moisture around each individual plant and deliver a single drop of water, that could use facial recognition technology to identify a specific pest and deliver a microdose of pesticide the size of a pinhead. No more blanket spraying, no more soil compaction from 100,000-pound machines. It was a theory, an experiment. It had never been tested on a full-scale commercial farm. The company was desperate for a real-world partner, for a test case. Sarah sent them a check for $385,000. In return, they sent her a shipping container. Inside were 150 of their prototypes, and 2 young engineers with laptops and nervous expressions. When the container arrived, the neighbors who had been watching with pity now watched with open disbelief. She had sold her father's magnificent combine for a box of toys, little remote-controlled helicopters. The talk at the co-op was brutal. She's lost her mind. She's spitting on Arthur's legacy. She's going to run that farm into the ground before he even gets home. But Sarah didn't hear them. She was in the West Field, with the 2 engineers, learning a new language, the language of code, of GPS coordinates, of data-driven agriculture. She was building a new kind of farm, from the dirt up. 2 weeks later, Arthur woke up. He was weak, confused, but he was alive. Sarah was there. She held his hand. He couldn't talk yet, but he could write on a small whiteboard. His first question, the combine? Sarah took a deep breath. She wrote on the board, "I sold it, Dad." She saw the confusion in his eyes turn to hurt, then to a deep, silent anger. He closed his eyes. He turned his head away from her, and for the next week he refused to look at her. He refused to acknowledge her in the room. The silence was worse than shouting. It was a wall of shame and betrayal. Sarah sat with him every day, reading, waiting. One afternoon she brought the farm's ledger to the hospital. She opened it on his lap. She pointed to the page where she had marked the loans. Paid in full. She showed him the deed to the land. His land. Their land. His eyes scanned the pages. He saw the numbers. The numbers he had tried to hide from her. The numbers he had tried to hide from himself. He looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in a week. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by something she couldn't read. He wrote on the whiteboard. Why? She didn't write back. She said it out loud. Because the dirt is enough, Dad. Everything else is just a tool. And that one was the wrong tool. He stared at her, and then a single tear traced a path through the dust and worry on his cheek. He closed his eyes, and he slept. A real sleep. For the first time since he'd woken up. Arthur came home a month later. He was frail. He walked with a cane. The farm he came home to was not the farm he had left. The big machine shed was mostly empty. In its place, a long workbench was filled with small drones being charged. The fields were dotted with small weather stations and soil sensors. Sarah and the two young engineers were huddled around a laptop screen, looking at color-coded maps of his land. He didn't understand it. He didn't try to. He just watched. From the porch swing, he watched the small drones lift off in swarms at dawn, moving across the fields in silent, geometric patterns. He watched Sarah, his daughter, who was no longer just his daughter. She was a commander, a strategist, a farmer. That first harvest was strange. No roar of a diesel engine, just the quiet hum of electric motors. Small robotic carts moved through the rows, picking the corn. The yield was 12% higher than his best year ever. Their input costs for fuel, fertilizer, and pesticides were down by 43%. It was the first time the farm had made a real profit. Not a break-even, not a roll-the-debt-over profit. A genuine, put-it-in-the-bank profit. In 10 years. Arthur sat at the kitchen table. Sarah put the final numbers in front of him, in the old ledger. He looked at the number at the bottom of the page. He looked at it for a very long time. Then he pushed the book back toward her. He said, "It's your farm now, Sarah. You run the books." And so she did. The story of the Harris farm began to change. It was no longer a story of struggle. It became a story of growth. Let me tell you about the next few years. 2005. They bought the 80 acres to the north from a neighbor who was retiring. Cash. 2007. They bought the 120 acres to the west. The old Miller place. Cash. 2009. The startup in California, Ag Robotics, was bought by a major tech company. Sarah's initial investment returned a check for $1.2 million. She used it to buy more land. Cash. 2012. She and the two engineers, who now worked for her, patented 2 new drone modifications they had developed. A self-cleaning sensor and a more efficient battery system. The patent was licensed to a manufacturer. It brought in a steady stream of royalty checks. Cash. By 2015, Harris Farms was 1,500 acres, completely debt-free, one of the most profitable agricultural operations in the state. And it was all run by Sarah, a handful of employees, and a fleet of 300 autonomous drones. Arthur spent his days on the porch swing, watching the quiet, efficient dance of the machines. He never set foot in a tractor again. He didn't need to. His legacy wasn't a machine in a shed. It was his daughter, remaking the world from his own backyard. Frank, the John Deere dealer, would drive by sometimes. He would see the fields, greener, healthier, more uniform than any of his customers' fields. He would see the strange, silent machines flitting over the crops. He would hear the talk at the co-op. No longer about the crazy girl who sold her father's combine, but about the genius who was outproducing everyone, with a fraction of the cost. He felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was a profound sense of having missed something, of having looked at the world, and seeing only what was already there, not what could be. The reckoning came in 2022. Arthur had passed away 2 years before, peacefully, in his sleep, at the age of 80. Sarah was no longer just a farmer. She ran Harris AgTech, a consulting firm that helped other farmers transition to precision agriculture. She was in her late 40s, respected, sought after. A quiet force in a loud industry. Frank's dealership was struggling. The price of new equipment had skyrocketed. Young farmers couldn't get the loans. His old customers were retiring, their kids selling the land to developers. The world he had known, the world he had mastered, was vanishing. He made an appointment to see Sarah. He drove to her office, in a new building on the edge of what used to be his west field. He walked in. She was standing by a window, looking out over the land. She turned when he entered. She looked just like her father. Frank didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing he could. "I was the man who told you not to sell that combine." Sarah just nodded. She waited. "I have thought about that conversation," Frank said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every week, for 18 years, I was so sure I was right. I was so certain I was helping you, protecting your father's legacy." He looked at her, his eyes pleading for something. Forgiveness, understanding, absolution. Sarah's expression was calm. There was no triumph in her eyes, no hint of, "I told you so." Just a quiet, deep empathy. "I know you were, Frank," she said. "You were a good man trying to do a good thing. But the most dangerous certainty is the one that comes from a good heart." Frank finally broke. He sat down heavily in a chair. He put his face in his hands. "I was wrong," he said, his voice muffled. "I was so wrong." She let him sit in the silence. Then she pulled up another chair. She sat down across from him. She said, "You were wrong about the machine, Frank, but you weren't wrong about the legacy. You just couldn't see what it was supposed to be. Now, tell me about your dealership. Let's see if we can figure out a new way forward." And that's the real legacy. It wasn't just about one farm. Sarah helped Frank transition his business, from selling massive machines to selling and servicing the new generation of smart ag tech. His dealership survived. It thrived. The Harris method, as it came to be known, was adopted by dozens of smaller farms in the county. They formed a co-op, sharing data, sharing resources. They were competing not on size, but on intelligence. They were free from the crushing cycle of debt. Sarah used the profits from her company to endow a scholarship at Iowa State University, the Harris Grant for Women in Agricultural Engineering. Every year, it pays for the full tuition of a young woman who wants to change the world of farming. We see one of them now, a young woman named Maria. in a lab, programming a drone. She talks about what the grant meant, how it gave her a chance no one else would, how Sarah Harris is her hero. Not because she was a great farmer, but because she was willing to build a different kind of future. Which brings us back to the beginning, to 2024, to the museum at the university. Frank is still standing in front of the glass case. His grandson is looking at him, concerned. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Frank doesn't take his eyes off the plaque. The name, Sarah Harris. He reaches out. He touches the cool glass, right over one of the small, white drones. A physical artifact of a quiet revolution. A revolution he tried to stop. "I knew her," he says, his voice barely a whisper. "I knew her when she was just a girl. I told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life." He turns then. He looks at his grandson, a boy who will inherit a world that she helped build. "And he says, his voice cracking just a little, I have never been so happy to have been so wrong." Somewhere, right now, someone is being told what they can't do. They're being told what their limits are. They are being warned not to risk it. And this warning isn't coming from an enemy. It's coming from a friend, a parent, a mentor, someone who loves them, someone who is genuinely trying to protect them from failure. This story is for them. The quiet devastation of proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. It's a battle fought not in arguments, but in ledgers, not in confrontations, but in decades of quiet, consistent work. The most powerful act of rebellion isn't loud. It's the day you pay off the loan they said you'd default on. It's the harvest that proves your crazy idea was the only thing that could save you. It's the freedom that comes when you stop asking for permission to build your own future, and you just start building. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to our channel. There are a million stories like this one waiting to be told. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time someone's certainty about your limits pushed you to prove them wrong. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the only legacy that matters is the one you build yourself.